Welcome. We are but 30 minutes away from the delivery of the midterm budget policy statement by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana. Of course, people are highly anticipating this. They want to hear from him in terms of what ideas does he have around charging economic growth? What ideas does he have around making the cost of living that much more manageable and so on? So there's a lot that is at stake, and of course he's going to give us a picture on how we're doing around debt. He's going to give us the fiscal framework around what we can expect from the 2026 budget that he'll deliver hopefully in February. I say hopefully, of course, because this year was such a very complicated year where the final budget was only delivered in May 2025. This after they had to withdraw, that is National Treasury had to withdraw its decision to put up VAT by 2 percentage points. All right, so to get into conversation now, I'm joined by Dominic Brown. He's from the People Opposing Budget Cuts, and also Huda Faker. She's the Black Sash, the National Advocacy Manager there. Thank you so much for joining us. Dominic, maybe I can start with you. As your title suggests, you're against budget cuts, you're obviously against austerity, and that has been a criticism of this government or National Treasury for the last number of years. What are you hoping that the Finance Minister will be saying at the midterm that speaks to your concerns?
Well, we should see a massive level of increased spending to public services, education and healthcare. This doesn't just mean a small real percentage increase. There's been more than a decade of underfunding. There's 112,000 vacancies in the public sector. This needs a massive increase in the level of expenditure to be able to deal with the social crisis and the unemployment crisis in the country.
Huda, perhaps I can just pose the exact same question to you.
Sure, it's important that social spending be increased. Although there is social spending, it is not meaningful. The lived reality is that people are struggling on the ground. We're specifically hoping that the social relief of distress grant will become permanent because there's huge unemployment, and despite the fact that we want it to be complemented by job creation, it's not happening. The investment programs they have with the expanded public works program is very limited and not sustainable, so it doesn't actually have a huge impact.
So Dominic, when Faker says that we need to have a situation where SRD becomes more permanent, but of course the government needs to juggle everything. On the one hand, we have debt where we're paying about 22% of revenue on paying back just the actual debt service costs each year, which runs into billions, about, I don't know, just over 400 billion rand a year, which is over R1 billion per day, for Treasury to pay back to the market money that we've borrowed for these initiatives. How do we get that balance right? Because obviously it doesn't help if we're highly indebted as well.
The question is, what's an effective public debt management strategy? So when you don't invest sufficiently in the economy, when you narrow the inflation target and push for increased interest rates, this throttles the economy and reduces prospects for development. Now, when you develop, you increase the size of GDP, and when you increase the size of GDP, that results in a declining debt to GDP ratio over time. So the problem is not so much that we are in a debt crisis, the problem is that we're using ineffective public debt management strategies.
All right, okay, we're going to leave it for now, Dominic and Faker. Thank you so much for that. Let me hand it over now to Abra, who's in conversation with some politicians.
And I'm continuing with asking political parties for their views and expectations of the minister's speech at 2 o'clock today. First of all, I'll be doing Brett Hayden of the Good Party. Brett, thank you so much for speaking to us today. What is it that Good is hoping to hear the minister say when he tables his speech at 2 o'clock?
So we don't expect that the minister will table or present economic data that has changed much since the budget speech in terms of economic growth projections. But we do need to hear from the minister around the government's new economic growth strategy, which is called GAIN, which has been widely publicized but not properly announced, the growth and inclusion strategy, and surely in this medium-term budget policy statement, we should be able to see how that economic growth strategy will influence future economic growth in our country and create employment. Then most importantly, as we always remind our government, the Social Relief of Distress Grant, there have been lots of promises around work on that Social Relief of Distress Grant to convert it into a basic income grant. And we would like to hear from the Minister of Finance that work has progressed and when we can expect to hear that South Africa will have a basic income grant. And right now we have a crisis of food insecurity or hunger in our country, and we would like to hear from the Minister that will be addressed through a national food program.
Brett Hayden, thank you so much for your time. I have Daisman Zanzi Songezo Zibi up next. Scopa Chairperson, you deal with all things financial at Parliament when it comes to keeping entities to account. What exactly is it that you would like to hear the Minister account on today when he presents the midterm budget speech?
Look, the issue that we had raised as early as last year, but particularly sharply this year, is the issue of the efficiency of government expenditure. Because government has too many programs, they overlap, they're not exactly measured in the way that we should measure whether they are working or not. I'll give you an example. The amount of money that is spent in the SETA space per trainee is the same or more than you spend per person at university level, for instance. We need to look at why that is and whether that system cannot be reformed such that you are able to make every rand go as far as possible. That is one example. The second thing, though, that is really important is that inflation is back under control at the moment. As you know, South Africa has a cost of living crisis. People actually can't afford rapid price increases. That is going to have an impact, and we'll see the numbers today on our debt servicing costs, because South Africa spends over 420 billion a year paying interest on debt. That number needs to come down so that we can take some of that money and direct it to other priorities within social spending.
Thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up with you after the speech. The Patriotic Alliance's Jasmine Peterson is also going to share her party's views. Let's get into it. What do you want to hear the ministers say at 2 o'clock?
Thank you so much, Ibra. I think it's important that we start by acknowledging that South Africa has a crisis of unemployment, especially for young people. But we are now dealing with a more urgent expectation, and that is a budget that protects women and children in the country. The statistics are shocking, and how can I say, the statistics are shocking, and we cannot continue to treat GBVF in this country as a side issue. So what the expectations would be is that this budget shows in real terms how government plans to protect women and children, and how the relevant departments will work together to deliver results sooner rather than later.
Ms. Peterson, thank you so much. We'll speak to you afterwards. Now it's Al Jamal's Imran Musa. Sir, thank you for your time. I'm just shifting over here. Just quickly, what do you want to hear the minister say?
So from Al Jamal's perspective, my name is Imran Musa. I'm the leader of Parliament here in the House. Yes. So basically, from Al Jamal's perspective, we want to see solutions. We're solution driven, and we commend the President for having the retreat recently. And that retreat recently has come up with some good solutions, and they've agreed that 62% of the budget should be allocated to combat poverty. I also feel that amongst the corporates and businesses to ensure that we have employment and food sustainability, and the way to create solutions and possibilities for our residents is that these corporates should engage in partnerships with government so that we can be successful, because we can't leave government itself to do everything. It's impossible, and I think globally we know that no budget will be sufficient for any country.
Thank you so much. We'll speak to you after the speech.
Thank you.
I think that is a wrap from us here in terms of asking parties for their expectations. And of course, we will catch up with you after once the minister's delivered his speech. Studio?
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Well, what's interesting is that depending on the prism through which you look at things, certain policies are good for the capital markets, but they're not so good for your ordinary folk on the ground. Inflation targeting is something that's been very topical. The Reserve Bank Governor Lesitsha Kganyago has indicated that the Reserve Bank is now going to be looking at the lower end of the target range, that is 3 to 6%. So that is they're going to be looking at rather 3%. That's where their focus is. And we're waiting to hear whether the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is going to confirm that indeed he is giving approval of that, and he's going to be setting a lower inflation target. Some people have suggested he must go for 2 to 4%, because that way the midpoint will be 3%, and that gives the Reserve Bank some leeway when inflation does spike due to external shocks or whatever. But the reason I started off by saying is that some policies are good for some and not for others is that I have someone with me here who is not really that in favor of a lower inflation target. I'm in conversation again with Dominic Brown. He's from the People Opposing Budget Cuts. Dominic, so tell me, I mean, economists and so on, they say it will be very important for us to have lower inflation, because if everyone anchors their inflation expectations lower, it means that the erosion of our local currency will be less and will have more value in our pockets. So why are you against it?
So in the first instance, it's important to say that the main drivers of inflation in our country is not too much money chasing too few goods. We don't have a problem of demand. In fact, there's declining levels of local demand in this country. But mainly the main way to deal or keep inflation as the way it has been is through increasing interest rates. And when we see the increasing interest rates, of which South Africa has amongst the highest level of interest rates in the world, we'll probably see the persistence of this with the narrowing of the inflation target. So what does a higher interest rate mean? Well, it means higher borrowing costs, higher debt service costs for most households who are already highly indebted. By having to pay more for household debts, we see less disposable income, which means a further decline in demand. Secondly, when we see high interest rates, it disincentivizes investment into the economy where jobs can be created, particularly in manufacturing, for example, where you have higher borrowing costs. So if we see high interest rates, we'll probably see effectively a continued choking of the economy due to lower levels of buying power and a lack of incentives for investing in them.
It's not my first time to hear these arguments, and they're solid arguments, but the Reserve Bank Governor will say short-term pain for long-term gain. In other words, in the longer run, if we do have longer-term inflation at a lower level, that's going to be beneficial in the long run.
Since the 2000s, South Africa has had very low levels of inflation, actually, behind certain periods. And so at the same period, we haven't seen massive levels of growth. Moreover, we hear from economists from the World Bank, for instance, who even indicate that the narrow target is, or how low the target is highly exaggerated. We've seen, and I'm not advocating for high levels of inflation, but we've even seen high levels of economic growth and development when inflation has been between 15 and 20%. And then I suppose you have to ask, what are the drivers of inflation? Is it, as I was saying, too much money chasing too few goods, or is it external factors? So is it due to increasing price in fuel costs? Is it due to changes in the way global trade is being organized, resulting in trade bottlenecks? All of these things can't be resolved through increasing the interest rate. So then you need to think what policy measures can help to deal with inflation, especially for low-income households. And here you have other more effective policy instruments. So, for example, you can cap the level of prices of certain goods within the market, price controls, particularly goods that are essential for people to live, right? And they will say there are zero-rated items, but we've seen that this hasn't really helped to curb the prices of these goods in society. So what it boils down to is, number one, the narrow inflation target is not a means of creating development. Instead, it will help to continue to contract the economy. And secondly, the interest rate is not a good instrument to be able to deal with inflation inflation when it occurs.
No, I think what you're saying, Dominic, it makes a lot of sense, but of course there's the counter argument, and we know that of course inflation is a tricky one, because I mean, even if you look at the largest economy in the world, the United States, they've been grappling with keeping inflation down since after the increase in inflation after COVID. I mean, their inflation target is actually 2%, but their inflation level is around 2.7%. But despite that, they're still cutting interest rates because they're worried about the pressure higher interest rates are having on corporates and, you know, households. So it's a tricky one. It's not an exact science. Dominic, thank you so much for your time. That was Dominic Brown. He's from the people opposing budget cuts.
Well, welcome again. We are outside the Good Hope Chamber. Of course, we're seeing a lot of ministers trickling into the chamber. All of them are coming from a cabinet meeting. We want to check whether the government of national unity is still holding, given what we saw earlier this year, where there was a budget impasse around the issue of the VAT increase, which was later abandoned. I'm going to bring in now one of the partners in the government of national unity, Chief Whip of the UDM, Ngabayomzi Kwangwa. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for making time. Firstly, let's start here. Do you expect that the government of national unity will find peace and collegiality in terms of supporting this mid-term budget?
Well, that's difficult to say because I'm not the spokesperson of the government of national unity. I'm hoping whatever differences might exist between the different parties within that GNU arrangement, we'll be able to discuss those amicably and find solutions to them. But what we expect is the UDM from here is issues around how when we went to the main budget, there were many issues around growth forecast, there were many issues around unemployment, how to reignite economic growth in South Africa. And there didn't seem to be consensus at the time. I do believe that the minister here will actually be giving a statement of intent as to how to collaborate all the proposals from the different partners from the government of national unity into one growth strategy for the country. I haven't had any dissenting noise insofar as the proposal that is going to table today. I think what will have to happen is that beyond him tabling this budget is that we need to see how we're going to put the nuts and bolts together towards implementing the program that is going to propose today.
Over the years, the ministers have been lamenting around the issue of the government spending review in terms of trimming the fat to ensure that you fund the most critical areas of government. Do you think he's going to make any announcements that will take us at least a little bit forward rather than telling us the same old story?
No, we can't fiscally consolidate ourselves into oblivion. I mean, we have embarked on this fiscal consolidation strategy for years. Now it's about time that whatever savings we've realized over the years are utilized towards making sure that we reignite growth in South Africa, but we also make targeted spending that is going to help us to address some of the socio-economic challenges facing the country. I think that is key for us insofar as this medium-term budget policy statement is concerned.
All right, thank you so much, Ngabayomzi Kwangwa, the UDM Chief Whip. Let me turn to my left now, Fadil Adams, the leader of the National Coloured Congress. Your expectation as the NCC?
Well, we've heard midterm budgets before. We're not expecting anyone to tear up any trees today. You know, for us, it's all about deliverables. It's about where's the value in this, and let's hope the president surprises us. But I don't think so.
Will the partners in the GNU find each other on this budget so that we don't see what we saw earlier in the year?
Oh, you know how it works with mixed race marriages. You never know. You know, these people are power hungry, man. They're power drunk. People will compromise their principles and vote against things that they don't believe, vote for things they don't believe for, just for those blue lights and those extra perks. We're more concerned about service delivery, and ultimately we'd like to see the minister today announce that we're going to start penalizing departments that aren't delivering, like SABC, for example, where top-level policemen are buying hotels and Lamborghinis with our tax monies, and you know what? They want increases in their budgets. We're hoping that the minister says, no, you make do with less, we're offering you less to steal. That's where we're hoping we'll go.
But they're arguing that they don't have enough resources to fight organized crime.
There's more than enough resources to fight organized crime if the top generals in the country only stop stealing.
Do you have proof of that?
Yes, I do. I've delivered it to SABC. And when I come to the ad hoc committee, I'll bring some more.
All right, thank you so much, Fadil Adams, the president of the National Coloured Congress. We're going to leave it at that as we go inside the chamber where the finance minister will be delivering the 2025 medium-term budget policy statement. It's back to you.